When they talk about winners, you assume that everybody goes into football because they want to win trophies.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I always viewed football as an entertainment industry.
Right.
My first thought when I go out on a football pitch is, I want to entertain people today.
It was
Why
kind
has
of
he not
ridiculous
stepped up?
that Saka was put in a position where he'd never taken a
It was
penalty in a professional career.
That was the most horrific decision from an England manager I think I've ever seen in my life.
What did you make of Nathan Jones? Because
it was a car crash.
It was a car crash, wasn't it?
It was.
It wasn't at that level, was he?
I found that so hard to deal with, so hard to not say anything about over the last few years, and that's what I think cost me my job.
This is Up Front with me, Simon Jordan. I believe there are a lot of vacuous, uninformed, unchallenged opinions out there. I want to get to the bottom line and cut through the nonsense. So with this podcast with William Hill, I'm going to get people with strong views who think they can stand them up to proper scrutiny. There's a good chance I might learn something along the way, and more importantly, so might you. Joining me in today's episode is a rare breed in football, a one-club man who spent 16 years at Southampton, considered a maverick, nicknamed a god, but overlooked on the international stage. Matt Le Tissier, welcome to Up Front.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be here.
I feel very privileged, to be honest with you, because it's third time lucky for me. 22 years ago, I had a brief phone conversation with you and Glenn Cockrell, trying to entice you to come to Crystal Palace. A couple of years ago, I tried to ask you to come on a show,
Indeed.
and you turned me down.
I didn't turn you down.
Third time lucky. We've got you here.
I was busy. What?
All right. Okay. Look, the whole subject matter is to talk about you and the various things in your life, and obviously find some relatability in all the things we talk about. But what I often do is start, when I talk to people like you, is talk about their makeup and the mechanics of their achievements and where it came from. And one of the sort of stock in trade questions is sort of defining a winner. I like to define a winner, but I also, more importantly, like you guys that have competed at the highest level and achieved things and got to a level of great recognition and achievements, as to what you think a winner looks like. And would you class yourself as one?
Looks like?
Would you class yourself as one?
Yeah, absolutely. I class myself as one. I've classed myself as a winner in life. I've got to the age of 54, and I can honestly say I've never really woken up on a day where I had to go to work and thought, I don't really fancy this today. And if you can wake up every day, go and do your job, and it not feel like a job, then I think you're a winner.
Because I tell you why I asked, because ultimately there was this debate the other day on a show that I did with Martin Keown, where he was talking about Arsenal.
Yep.
And he was talking about the players being winners. And Ferdinand went after him and basically said, a winner is somebody that wins something, and somebody that elects to compete in the biggest space and wins in that particular environment. And the reasons why I ask you about it is because you obviously elected to stay at one particular football club.
Yep.
And take ostensibly the opportunities that existed in that space. And some would say that's comfortable, that's easy. And I suppose I'm pushing back against the notion, because I think winning is giving your best all the time. That's what I think winning is.
There's lots of definitions of what a winner is. I've given one, and people who have been in successful football teams and have won things will say that being a winner is that, and I completely get why they would say that. For me, as a young kid growing up in Guernsey, from about the age of 8 years of age, I can remember having two ambitions in my life. One of them was to be a professional footballer, and the other one was to play for England. I got to achieve those by the age of 25, and for me, that's a win. That's a win for me. Nobody from Guernsey had ever played for England before, ever.
Right.
And so to have that ambition as an 8-year-old kid, that was quite something.
Right. Because I spoke to Souness, Graham Souness, the other day, who described you as the most talented player that he'd either played with or managed.
Wow.
He talked about your preference.
Why do you keep dropping me then?
Well, that's a different discussion. He talked about your preference for McDonald's, and Stuart Pearce called you the milkshake king today. But he talked about this talent, this natural talent, and the fact that given Souness's back catalogue of who he's played for and where he's managed, right, it's pretty much up there with accolades, isn't it? And he doesn't doesn't dispense them too
No,
freely.
I know that. That's
So
why I said, wow.
does that not lend you to the conclusion that there were better opportunities for you and bigger outcomes that you could have had when you look back retrospectively? Maybe not at the time, but when you look back on it.
Yeah, possibly there were things I could have done. I could have joined Spurs in 1990. Could have joined Liverpool in 92, I think it was. Could have joined Chelsea in 1995. But
when you say could have, I mean, were there offers in for you?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, I nearly
signed
for Spurs when I was 21.
Right.
Yeah, I actually signed a contract to join Spurs and changed my mind before the two clubs.
Who was the manager?
Had agreed to fee Terry Venables. Yeah, in 1990. So I often say this when people say, "Oh, how come he didn't get so many caps for England?" And
you think it's because of that?
In 1990, when I turned Spurs down, Terry was manager, and when my agent went back to him and said, "No, Matt's not coming," my agent rang me back and said, "Terry wants to speak to you," because I hadn't spoken to Terry, just representatives at Spurs, and I went, "No, I don't want to speak to him. I've made my mind up."
Right.
And then in 1995, when Chelsea tried to buy me, Glenn Hoddle was manager.
Right.
And the exact same thing happened.
Okay.
And I went, I've made my mind up. I don't want to speak to him. Now, that was hard for me because Glenn was my hero as a kid. I was a Spurs fan growing up. Glenn Hoddle was my absolute idol. I based everything I did on a football pitch.
On Hoddle.
On Glenn Hoddle. Yeah. And Liam Brady to a certain extent as well. I wanted my left foot to be decent like Liam Brady's as well. So those two guys were my heroes. So to turn him down and go, no, I don't want to talk to him, that was quite a big thing. And then he became the next England manager as well. So and both of them kind of gave me a couple of opportunities, but not many. The one thing that I would say when people say you didn't get as many caps, it was a lot harder, I think, back in the 90s. We had a lot more really good forward-thinking English players. So, you had Peter Beardsley, Teddy Sheringham, people like Robbie Fowler and Stan Collymore and Ian Wright and Les Ferdinand, all these guys that probably, you look at their ability and a lot of them would say, I should have had more caps. Andy Cole, the amount of goals that he scored and the caps that he got. So there was a lot of talent around there, and obviously Gaza, and Gaza was probably a big part of that. The disappointing thing from my point of view is that I was given 3 starts for England. I got 8 caps, but only 3 of them were starts. One of those games was abandoned after 27 minutes because I played in the game in Dublin, and the other 2 appearances were 3 years apart. That's not really any great opportunity to show what you can do at international level.
So what do you attribute that to them?
I attribute that to the team that I was playing at the time. I think there was definitely a big club bias in the 90s. And I also attribute that to the reputation that I was given by the media of being a luxury, lazy player. Now, I was labelled that very early on, unfit. And it's very difficult when you get that reputation as a teenager to shake that off for the rest of your career because you get labelled that. And it's, I always say to people, how could I have been lazy if in 540 appearances for a team, for the majority of that were in the bottom half of the table, 540 appearances, I scored 209 goals, probably created another 100 or so. I couldn't do that. If I was lazy when we were in the bottom of the table in the second week of January.
Does it annoy you, and did it annoy you at the time, being called lazy?
I thought it was unfair. Yeah. But you can't fight against the machine, so I took it.
209 goals in the amount of games that you played. I think it was 165 of them at 443 league games, something like that, wasn't it? If you divided that, prorated it by 38 games in the Premier League, you'd be scoring 14 goals a season, every season, which is attributed as great success for Jermaine Defoe being a prolific goal scorer in the Premier League. It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? How people can make figures represent it one way and yet characterise people in another.
It is, but it was a very different time back then. We weren't so much stats based back then. It was very opinion based.
Yeah.
I was a 21. The year I won the Young Player of the Year in 1990, I scored 24 goals that season. I was 21 years of age, scoring 24 goals. Now, if you bring that forward to today's football, and you put an English midfielder, and at 21 years of age scoring 24 goals in the season, do you think he would be in the England squad?
You would. On the balance of probability, you'd find it difficult not to argue with the fact that he should or shouldn't be.
Okay, so during that season, I didn't even get a mention for being in an England squad, scoring 24 goals at the age of 21. Not a mention.
You've got an interesting philosophy Because I half agree with the idea of what a winner looks like, which is the ability to go out and do something, only do what you want to do because you enjoy it, and the ability to have an opportunity to have to do it. But I also think you've got to define it by some form of meritocracy.
Yeah,
right?
I think.
Did you enjoy being a sort of I suppose the embodiments of a big fish in a small pond? Was that part of your motivation?
100%. And I've always admitted that. I've always enjoyed being the small fish in the big pond, or the big fish in the small pond. And that's something that is part of my makeup. So what people have to realise about me when they talk about winners, you assume that everybody goes into football because they want to win trophies.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I always viewed football as an entertainment industry.
Right.
And my first thought when I go out on a football pitch is, I want to entertain people today. Now, on the back of that, entertaining people for me is about creating and scoring goals.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people go and watch football matches for. So on the back of that leads to results. But that wasn't my primary motivation. My primary motivation was to enjoy myself on a football pitch because I knew I was good at it. And I wanted to make people happy by watching me play football.
Did you think of yourself as a maverick?
Did I think of myself as a maverick? I knew I was different, yeah. I knew I was different. I knew I had a different mentality to a lot of people. And I knew I had a very different skill set to pretty much everybody I played with. But on the back of that, I was always the first person to admit that there was stuff that my teammates could do that I couldn't do. I needed them to be able to do their job for me to be able to do my job.
Do you think staying at Southampton, I mean, you've talked about it as being comfortable because you're a ballsy character. You don't care what you say and you stand by it, right?
Yep.
And the fact you didn't want to talk to Venables and you didn't need to talk to Glenn Hoddle because you'd made your mind up shows a certain resilience and stubbornness and a belief in yourself and a fortitude to stay with what you think, and you're not necessarily there for turning.
Yeah.
Do you think staying at one club is beyond the comfortable side of things? Is it a combination of loyalty and comfort, or does it really move into the territory of a bit of a lack of ambition?
There was definitely a loyalty part of that. I always felt like I owed Southampton Football Club something. They gave me the opportunity to achieve my.
See, I like that. Yeah. It's a two-way transaction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a two-way transaction, yeah. Like the Ivan Toney situation now, which is the basis of Brentford want to stand by him and he needs to sign a new contract.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So there was always that. I always had that feeling that this football club gave me the chance to achieve my childhood ambitions. So that was always one thing. The other thing was the fans at Southampton Football Club were, right from the very first time I set foot on a pitch, were unbelievably good to me.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like I owed them something as well. But there was also that bit of me that was, happy to be in a comfortable situation at my football club where I knew I could play football the way that I wanted to play it. And I probably couldn't have done that if I'd have gone to a bigger club with bigger ambitions. I would have had to have towed the line a little bit more. I would have had to have probably taken things a lot more seriously than I actually did. And got that winning mentality instead of an entertaining mentality.
Do you think modern players, any of the things that you just said, pop into their psyche?
Don't think so. I think if it does, it would be a very, very rare thing to do. I think in this day and age, I think the word loyalty is kind of almost gone from football completely now. Yeah,
I mean, I've always had this feeling about loyalty that the fans are the ones that have the predominant loyalty, and even they sometimes desert the cause when it gets a bit tough. But I always felt that loyalty was based upon, if I give you a contract, and Matt Le Tissier played for me and I give you a 3-year contract, I expect you to do your very best for me for 3 years. And at the end of those 3 years, we part company or we don't part company. That's the end of it. And if you kiss the badge during the meantime, then fantastic. But realistically speaking, loyalty was a slightly misguided premise. But when you look at, say, the sentiment that you deployed, which was being a one-club man, you've had a few of them around, Tony Adams, Stephen Gerrard, John Terry, Ryan Giggs, and in Spain, Carlos Puyol. But why do you think it is so rare now
I think the opportunities that come along with transfers are quite tempting in terms of the amount of money that you can make somewhere else.
Bosman rule.
One of the
that,
things, one of the things in my day that was probably the big difference now is that I could have, so back in the mid-90s when Chelsea tried to buy me, for example, I think I was on about, I don't know, but I was on about $2,000 a week, something like that. And if I'd have moved to Chelsea, I'd have probably gone maybe $10,000 a week.
Right.
So the jump is, it's quite a big jump.
5 times, yeah.
Relatively speaking, when you're talking about in today's terms, if I was at Southampton now, for example, and I was earning $40,000 a week, and Man City came in for me and offered me $250,000 a week. I mean, even that might have tested my loyalty.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
Of course, $2,000
to $10,000, and that's the other thing. I wasn't in football to become rich. I never took up football to become rich. I never took up football to become famous, and I never took up football to become rich. I took up football because I was good at it, and I loved the sport, and I loved putting a smile on people's faces, watching the things that I could do on a football pitch.
Because I think that's an interesting, and I used to say this to some of the players when I had young Wayne Routledge, Palace, and Spurs trying to buy him. We just got promoted from the Championship. Wayne was a young starlet playing for the 17s, 18s at England, and he was coming up to a contract renewal, and Spurs tried to get him. Daniel backdoored me and tried to get him, and I said to him, look...
Do you want to rephrase that? I mean, that doesn't sound good that Daniel backdoored you.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very good, does it?
Doesn't sound good. You might need to cut that bit out.
I need to think that bit. We'll edit that bit. Yeah, thank you very much, yeah. Daniel tried to... I was going to say bend me over. That's not much better.
Oh, dear. Where's this going?
Yeah, I had a young player at Palace, Wayne Routledge, and Daniel Levy tried to pull a flanker on me and get him without necessarily, I would say, tapping up. Yeah. We'll leave that as an allegation that's yet to be substantiated. But what I said to Wayne was, learn your trade, develop your career. If you're a good player, you're going to get the opportunities. Because it's interesting that you talked about, because there's very few paupers that are good at football. If you're good at it and you get an opportunity to be successful and you're playing for a football club, then your talent will come to the surface and you'll not be a secret and you'll get a move. Yeah. So it's interesting that you've got that as part of your thinking, which is, I wanted to be good. I don't think it exhibits enough in the modern day football. I think there's too much money around. I think there's too many people in people's ears. Yep. I think too many people are being influenced by the wrong outcomes. Yep. Not that this is a direct link to that, but what do you make of Harry Kane's situation and the thinking behind the choices that he's made? I mean, I know that the allegation is that he tried to get out of Man City a year ago, and probably the interview of Gary Neville didn't help the cause, and probably having his kid brother as an agent probably didn't help it much either, because he's not plugged into the real understanding of how to do big deals. Can you relate to Harry Kane? Can you put yourself in his shoes and think what his thinking is?
Yeah, 100% I can. I mean, Harry's obviously become Spurs' all-time leading goal scorer, which will be something that will, that's a legacy. That's a proper legacy. I would have loved to have done that at Southampton. I didn't quite catch Mick Shannon, which is something that annoys me to this day.
Yeah, spinning arm.
But I think what Harry has done at Spurs has been incredible. The only person who knows what's in his head and what he thinks and what he wants to achieve in his life is Harry himself.
And Spurs would be considered a big club, so he's already in that big club space, isn't
he? And he's not going to be like me and have to work for the rest of his life. I didn't earn enough.
But that's timing, isn't it? I mean, you come out of the game in 2002, 2003.
That's not me being bitter.
No, I didn't think it was.
In any way,
what
shape,
I'm saying
at
is,
all.
if you played now, you'd be getting $100,000 a week, right? So you'd have the same situation.
I'd be on more than that,
or whatever. Okay, yeah. Well, you'd need that to prop up your fast food diet, right?
See, that's a myth as well. See, that whole McDonald's thing. I'm going to address that.
Glenn Cockrell was your captain at Southampton, and he's the one that told me it. And it was supported by Souness. And Souness also told me that he tried to get you to change, tried to get your routine to be a little bit different, tried to get you to conform to what was his way of thinking, and you pulled a thigh or something. Went, no, leave him. Let him get on what he was doing. He's winning games for us. He's the most talented player I've ever had play for me. I'll let it alone.
Yeah.
So it's not true. So Glenn Cockle's saying that you eat McDonald's on the way to every game was not true.
Certainly not on the way to a game. I would never have a
pre-match
McDonald's
meal.
on the way.
Your pre-match meal was chicken nuggets.
It was never ever. And I didn't actually like.
Never ever.
I didn't like the burgers from McDonald's really.
Oh dear.
Quite frankly.
Would you prefer Wimpy?
I'm a fish and chip man, really.
Oh, much better.
Yeah, bad sausage and chips is probably the one. If I went to
Logical
McDonald's,
pre-match meal, some Savoloys.
What they're talking about is I used to go there before training, and I used to have
much better.
And I used to have a sausage and egg McMuffin on occasions on the way to
so
training.
So the McDonald's is not. But misrepresentation,
there's this thing that thinks that I lived on burgers and stuff, and I didn't even like the burgers from McDonald's, quite frankly. But their sausage and egg McMuffins were quite good. I didn't have that every day, and I certainly never had it on the day of a game. I would never have done that.
Wasn't there an element of, until we had the sort of Wenger revolution?
Yeah.
You'd have been caught in between two stools, wouldn't you?
There was no sports science.
Two cultures.
Yeah, there was not a lot of sports science in our day.
You were very successful and very prolific. In fact, you missed one, didn't you, in penalties? I have this thing, right? And a lot of you guys won't like it, and Martin Keown doesn't like it, and Stuart Pearce didn't like it. I had the audacity to call Stuart Pearce across the studio a bottler for missing a penalty in the World Cup, and I liked Stuart a lot, and at that moment he didn't like me very much. But I questioned Harry Kane. It's very easy for me to sit there and say something, but as a professional footballer, I think you take a penalty, you should score. That's your job.
Yeah.
And that's what it's there for.
I think the same. I think I feel embarrassed that I missed one.
Right. I mean, how much of a skill in terms of technique? Because obviously, with the moniker of you being one of the most gifted players that we've seen, and that's being supported by people that you've played for, and you'll probably think it yourself anyway. How much of technical ability and a variety of other things makes somebody... Because I remember growing up with Ray Stewart, who was a West Ham penalty, he'd walk down the middle and blast it. Right?
Yeah. I think for me, penalty taking is probably... I think it's probably about 90% of it is in your head. And 90% of it is the way you approach it. I think if you're going to be a penalty taker, you have to look forward to taking penalties. You have to embrace that situation. You've got to be really comfortable with the entire football stadium watching you and you only for that split second.
But I'm picking up on my observation, or about the observation that's made by a lot of people about the principle of bottling, because people said that Harry Kane bottled that. I think he did, because if it's in your mind...
For what?
No one saved it. I was wrong. I called Stuart Pearce a bottler for missing that penalty in 1990, and then I realised that the goalkeeper saved it. So that's not as much. But
okay. So if you miss the target, you're saying it's
correct.
It.
That's the distinction
so that's
I make.
Distinction, right?
If you miss a penalty, if the goalkeeper makes a world class save and you've had a real good go at it, and the goalkeeper makes a brilliant save, then you have to give credit to the goalkeeper.
You do.
If you miss the target, I get
that. I get that.
I think there's more an element of bottling.
Missing the target from 12 yards as a professional footballer in a situation where you are the chosen penalty taker, that's probably not a good look.
But is it bottling?
Is it bottling it? The only person that knows if they bottled it or not is the person taking the penalty, because they know what's going on between their ears.
What's the alternative? So if you don't hit the target, what else can it be then?
So I listened to Paul Merson tell a story where he had a penalty at Bramall Lane. He said he put the ball down on the penalty spot,
right,
and he walked back and he looked at the goal, and he knew he couldn't score. Yeah,
right,
and he said it was just the goalkeeper looked massive, the goal looked really small, and he just knew he couldn't score. But he said even though he felt that, he couldn't turn around to one of his teammates and go,
"You take over,
you take this." He said he couldn't do that because that'd be a sign of weakness. So he stepped up and he smashed it over the crossbar. Missed it. So he knew it, and that's what I'm talking about, the mentality side of things. Now that you could argue is bottling it.
Yeah, no, because I remember, again, with my side, Palace, we played Sunderland in a playoff semi-final in 2004. And we won the first leg 3-2. We went to their place, bashed them up for 75 minutes, were 2-0 down, out of the competition, scored a goal in the 90th minute. Neil Shipley, who you'd have played with, right?
I did play with
The rumour training at Palace was 7 laps around Neil Shipley. Different discussion.
He's a big lad.
He's a big lad. But Neil committed GBH and the goalkeeper, and Darren Powell scored the goal to get us back in, and we got to a penalty shootout. And I watched from afar at the Stadium of Light senior players letting 17-year-old kids walk up and take penalties.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Hughes didn't want to take one. He took one in the end. He was like walking to the gallows.
Yeah.
But Wayne Routledge, as a 17-year-old kid, was sent up to take a penalty. And I'm watching these senior pros going, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah, what are you doing? I think that's a big criticism. I think, you know, you could argue that with the penalty shootout in the European Championships.
Yep.
There were some players there that you thought,
yeah,
why is he not?
It was kind of ridiculous
that
that Saka was put in a position where he'd never taken a penalty in a professional career.
That was the most horrific decision from an England manager I think I've ever seen in my life.
What do you make of Southgate?
I think
I'm not enamoured with him, but what do you make of him?
I think
he's bloody lucky.
Done the bare minimum.
Do you?
I think he's done the bare minimum of what should have been expected given the teams that we played against.
I agree. I'll make the exact same case and point because everyone gets on this bandwagon about what we've achieved and how we've got to a World Cup semi-final and how we've got to a European Championship final. And I asked the question, who have we beaten that we shouldn't have beaten?
And look at the positions we were in those games where we should have gone on.
Absolutely.
And
the decisions that were made at the time
were responsible for us not kicking on. So I think he's done the bare minimum.
Yeah, I mean, because I look at the Italian game and I look at the decisions that were made when we are winning this game, and the only time we change it is when they've scored.
Yep. Yeah. I thought there were both the Croatia and the Italy game where we go 1-0 up and we don't go to kill the game off. We sit back and we invite the team onto it.
Because, I mean, exactly the same. I felt that I call him four-leaf clover boy because I think some of the managers that were previous that could have had those draws, even when you play Colombia, their best player ain't fit.
Yeah.
You know, and we play the Germans that were a shadow of themselves. And the only time and that's why I was so keen and enthusiastic to see us beat France, because that would have shut me right up in my tracks.
Yeah.
That would have put people like me back in my box, which is basically you've now beaten somebody that on paper the suggestion is you can't.
You shouldn't, yeah.
Without wanting to be too vitriolic, do you think that it's a rewarding of mediocrity with Southgate getting the job in the first place and being continued to be patronised?
I think what it is, actually, the more relevant point is, who else is there? English managers.
Does it have to be? Okay. Does it have to be an English manager?
I think an Englishman should manage England.
Why?
Because you're representing your country and you should be from that country.
But why?
Because
you get the culture of the country better, because you ultimately understand
your pride. It's your pride in your country. And if you're going to have an international tournament where all your players have to be English, although they've changed them rules now as well, I think your manager is still part, and your manager should be under the same rules as your players should be, because you're all part of that same squad. So why is there a different rule for a manager, his eligibility, than there is for the players when you're all one team? That's my thoughts on it. But I would prefer to see.
What would you prefer to see? Okay, I'm going to cut across and you can tell me what you prefer to see. Would you prefer to see a winning England team or a team that has an England manager that's English?
I would prefer to
see a winning England team with an England manager.
Yeah.
But if you had to have one or the other, you cantankerous sod.
I have this kind of innate feeling inside of me about fairness and about trying to do things properly. And I think to do things properly, my feelings are that if you're a manager of a national team, you should be that nationality.
Yeah, I don't disagree in an ideal world, but we live in a globalised world now, don't we? Yeah. And I look at it and go, best in class. That term. Well, and we may hate it, but it happens to be a statement of fact, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, we are affected by all manner of things around the world. We've opened up our marketplace. Everything in this country is being bought by everybody else besides the people that live in it. Mm-hmm. So I'm very much a proud Englishman. I want our country to be proud of itself. I want us to be the best in class. I want us to achieve things.
So if you would prefer England to win the World Cup with an English manager or with a non-English manager, or does it not really matter to you?
Well, I don't think it really matters to me that much. In an ideal utopian world, I'd like it to be completely indigenous so that we've got an England manager that was capable of leading the England side. We've had one before called Brian Clough, and he wasn't given an opportunity because he stepped into the area that I've alleged you are, which is a maverick, and wasn't prepared to accept the status quo. And probably would have been very successful in not accepting it, but it would have made people uncomfortable. And you can't make people uncomfortable in this country, can you?
No,
that's
not allowed.
Good. That's not a good thing.
Not allowed.
I just want to touch upon Harry Kane once more, and not to get you into clickbait territory, but just to get a perspective on it. Do you think football fans would kind of accept Harry Kane prioritising personal accolades over staying with Spurs? Because he's earned the right to leave Spurs now, hasn't he?
Yeah, of course he has. And I funny enough, I had dinner with a group of Spurs fans recently, and all of them, to a man, said, "Do you know what? If he went, we wouldn't have any complaints. He's given his time here. He's done everything that he can in his ability that he's got to try to win Spurs a trophy. It hasn't worked. I think Harry can hold his head high in the fact that he's done his job, and he's probably been let down by the players around him. If every other player in that Tottenham team was doing their job as competently as Harry Kane was doing his, they would have won a trophy by now."
All right, I'm going to move on to something that's probably dear to your heart, albeit there's been a slight detachment of the relationship recent times for a variety of reasons. But Southampton, obviously they've gotten relegated. They've gotten relegated before. They've gone into administration as a football club previously. And they've come back. They spent a lot of time out of the Premier League, got dropped all the way down to League One, didn't they?
They did.
Pardew took over and bought a player for me, Joseph Font, and built back up and got up back up the table.
Thanks very much for that, by the way. He was great for us.
It was all right, Joseph, wasn't he?
Did a really good job for us.
Really nice
good.
lad. Nice lad. I think Neil Warnock was the manager. I think Neil thought he was too nice.
That was the best £2 million Southampton have ever spent. I tell you,
£2 million.
I mean,
I didn't get £2 million for it.
No. Let me finish.
What do you know that I don't know?
I thought it was £1 million for Jose and £1 million for Ricky Lambert. So
okay.
while we were in League One,
right?
So that's the £2 million I'm talking about. So you can tell me if it was different. That's not what you got for Jose.
I got Nicola Cortese, who was the architect of everything successful at Southampton. Everything was down to Nicola. When you look at Southampton this season, I know Martin Semmens.
Yeah,
I think he's quite a good lad.
Yeah, I know.
The Southampton CEO. Where do you? I mean, you've got a new ownership model, and for them, a new owner, not a new ownership model.
Yeah.
For them, it's a car crash, isn't it? You know, the first season they've been in control, in sole control, clank, they've gone through the floor.
After investing a lot of money as well.
Where do you lay the blame at that?
I think the biggest portion, because you can't just lay it on one person. When the club gets relegated, there's obviously multiple things that
they make the case about recruitment, don't they? They're talking about the fact they bought a lot of young players. They didn't have enough senior players in the dressing room to balance it off.
I think that the majority of the blame lies with the recruitment policy for this season. You know, we've spent nearly 140 million quid this season.
Yeah.
We've never done that in our history, ever, without selling somebody else for big money. And you have to look at that and say, how can we, after having spent that amount of money, be detached at the bottom of the Premier League? I don't think you can look at the actual owners themselves. You know, they've put their hands in their pockets to a serious extent and gone, right, we're going to back you. Here's a whole bunch of money that you've never had before.
But blindly backing you.
Yeah.
Because no one would suggest that underspending 140 million quid on a series of young players when the balance in the dressing room isn't right is good business sense.
So recruitment for me was probably the biggest part. The players themselves got to take a look at themselves, because I saw some woeful performances this season. And honestly, I was at the game when they got relegated against Fulham, and seriously, some of those players made me look like a workhorse.
Okay,
it was incredible. I've sat in that stadium and watched a team go down without a fight.
Right.
And for all the accusations that were levelled at me in my career, the one you would never have thrown at me was that when we were in a relegation scrap, I did not hide.
You didn't have the stomach for it. Yeah.
You know, and what I witnessed in that game against Fulham was not nice.
Do you think they were right to take Hasenhüttl out?
I think at the time I could understand the decision. The club hadn't really moved forward in terms of where we were when he took over. Now, you could argue that he wasn't really backed. However, this season he had been backed. Not all of that 140. Some of that was in January when he wasn't there. So it was about 80, I think, in the summer that we spent, which is still
a
we hadn't
significant
spent
spend,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
money.
yeah.
So he was backed for the first time. How much say did he have in those transfers? I don't know. I liked Ralph personally as a coach. I liked the way that he tried to get his teams to play. I thought sometimes he had deficiencies in terms of he kept trying to go back to a 3 at the back, which our players were not capable of playing. And every time we did it, we just got smashed. Some of his substitutions were bizarre in-game management.
So are you getting to the point where you think it was time?
So I think I could understand why the decision was made. Then once you've made that decision, you then have to get it right.
What did you make of Nathan Jones? Because
it was a car crash.
It was a car crash, wasn't it?
It wasn't
at that level, was he? But I don't think it was not at that level in terms of his ability to coach. Because I think they thought they made some really educated decisions based upon the numbers that came out and the reasons why they made decisions. But it was his ability to manage Premier League footballers was the problem, wasn't
it? And I think his ability to come across well in his press conferences as well. I thought it's just a little bit bizarre.
And the players will be listening to that and finding anything they can use as an excuse for the reasons for their performances not coming up to snuff.
Well, you know that. You know that more than most.
Do you think they're in a position, Southampton, to bounce back?
It appears from the statements that have been made so far from Sport Republic that they're still willing to be there and back the club. So
we've got no bleeding choice.
From that point of view, not really. From that point of view, I guess it all depends on how many of those players kind of we lose. The few decent ones that were.
He's going to go, though, isn't he?
Yes.
Ward-Prowse is going to go, isn't he?
I would imagine so. I would imagine so.
And a few of the other ones.
Like
some
Harry
of them
Kane,
deserve to go and be good to get rid of them, right?
Yeah. But like Harry Kane, I don't think any Southampton fans would begrudge James Ward-Prowse to move right now.
I mean, I suppose we've answered this question, but I want to weave him into the conversation anyway because he's popping up now at Chelsea. I mean, he was exciting at Southampton, Pochettino. He went on to develop a good side at Spurs. I think he's a bridesmaid. I think anyone can win in France with PSG. And I think I'm yet to be convinced that he's an overall winner, Pochettino. And to go and manage Chelsea doesn't matter what people suggest about Todd Bowley right now. You're going to have to win sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But Southampton, since Pochettino, have pretty much regressed them, haven't they? Even with the case that we make for Hasenhüttl.
Not quite.
Do you not think so?
Not quite, because we had Ronald Koeman.
Right.
So Ronald Koeman was more successful at Southampton than Pochettino was, which kind of tends to get forgotten.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
so
you're
Pochettino,
right.
We finished 8th under Poch. Under Ronald.
Funny
I think
narratives that get created in one's mind.
We finished 7th and 6th, I think. We had European football.
Poch got you
under
8th.
Koeman.
Claude Puel got you 8th, who everyone hated.
Now that was interesting because we finished the season that Puel took us to 8th, and everybody was going, "Oh, he shouldn't have been sacked. He shouldn't have been sacked. He got us to 8th," which sounds great, but from where we were the season before, where I think we'd also finished 8th the season before. But we'd finished 8th with 17 less points under Puel. And
so the bar was lower.
So the points were a lot lower. The performances and the level of entertainment that you
far less low.
Oh my God.
Do you see any parallels between Southampton and Brighton? Because once upon a time, I remember there was 2 academies in this country that were really revered, and I'm going to take credit for one of them because Palace was a great academy.
Yep.
Out came Bostock, out came Victor Moses, out came Nathaniel Klein, and who you lot bought. Out came Wilfred, and on I can go. And then the Southampton Academy produces Theo Walcott, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Gareth Bale, and I know my mate Rupert Lowe took a lot of pride in the reflective glory of that. But do you see, and Southampton were always one of these clubs, it seems, that were constantly asked to replenish.
Yeah,
they produced players. They saw the vision in certain players, got them in the side, played well. Someone else come along and played and nicked them.
Yeah,
and there's an element of that going on at Brighton. Do you see similarities? That there's an inevitability. Like Southampton couldn't keep on replenishing keep on having to buy cheaply, selling high. Sadio Mane goes out the door. Ricky Lambert goes off to Liverpool. Adam Lallana, Gareth Bale, etc., 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 etc.
It's really difficult. I mean, you know yourself how hard it is to keep hold of a player who is being coveted by one of the big boys, and that is football. You know, the harsh reality of football is that 99% of all football clubs are selling clubs.
Yeah.
It's just at what level you're at to sell on.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's for sale. Someone's prepared to pay the price, right?
Absolutely. So, so it is incredibly difficult, and that's why it's so hard to break into, the real top echelons of football, unless you now have what used to be hundreds of millions is now, you're talking about billions now, to try and break into that level where you're really challenging with the big boys. So I think what Brighton have done have been incredible. I think.
Do you think it's just? Do you think? I mean,
can they sustain it?
Yeah, because I get the impression
question.
that they're miles ahead of everybody else. Because I mean, whilst data is only as good as what you do with it, the understanding of what you're buying and the reasons why you're buying it, and the thought process is about not the Moneyball mentality that people think it is.
Yeah.
But I get the impression that Brighton are really, really in a groove right now, really understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and they're probably a couple of years ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
But do you think there's a possibility that Brighton could find themselves in a similar situation? Because every time they produce top players, some bugger's going to come along and meet the buy price, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well, and it's not just on the field as well. If you start getting a recruitment department that is doing well, they're going to get nicked by the big boys, and that's happened to us. And so it's really difficult to keep replenishing. And at some point, you will get it wrong on occasion, because football, nobody gets every decision right. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to move you on to punditry, and your involvement with that.
Yeah.
You were part of Soccer Saturday, which was, I think, phenomenal. I think phenomenal because we're staring at a group of guys talking about something with a tally printer, and I used to watch it for hours. And you find yourself...
But we made it fun.
Well, this is it. I was going to say to you, what do you put down the success of it to? Because it is successful.
It was successful.
Was successful, sorry. They made big decisions that obviously changed the direction of that.
They did. The camaraderie between the panel, we all knew how to push each other's buttons, as too well from working with Jim, because I listen to you and I can see the similarities with what's happening. But the great thing was we could have these really debates. We all loved our football. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So first thing was we all still loved football. We loved watching football. We were passionate about our teams. And that came across, I think, to the people watching the show. Secondly, we all knew that we could have really good debates on things. We could have polarized opinions and we could have a proper argument about it. But we knew when that subject was finished, we would move on and we'd still all be mates. We wouldn't fall out over our opinions. We had sensible, sometimes grown up adult conversations about things, and we made it fun. And I think that's what made it so popular.
What drove the changes in your view?
What drove the changes?
Was it diversity driven?
I think once Comcast had bought Sky, it changed overnight.
Yeah,
it changed overnight, and all of a sudden, it was diversity and inclusion and all that stuff. So I guess we kind of saw it coming.
Didn't you say that the reasons why they parted companies? I hate using the word sacked because it's one of those media words, isn't it? But you said the reasons why you parted companies because of your views on coronavirus.
I think partially. Yeah, I think that was partially to do with it. Partially to do with my views on Black Lives Matter. Yeah, not wearing the badge on Sky. I don't think that went down very well. I was quite critical of the mainstream news media on my social media.
Why didn't you wear the badge? I wouldn't have worn it, and principally, I don't agree with some of the sentiments behind it. Not just because it was indexed to a political movement, but I also was uncomfortable with the allegation that our society was institutionally racist.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why I wouldn't. I'd kind of.
We've got racism in our society. You'd accept that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But if you think that by wearing a badge like that, you're going to change the mind of the small minority of people in this country who are racist, if you think that by wearing a badge that's going to change it, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. Because the people who are racist, and I think that there is a very tiny minority of people, in my opinion, in this country who are racist.
I agree. On both sides
and
of
I
the
think
divide.
The majority of people in this country are good people and don't see skin colour And I think that is
I
getting
agree.
better with each generation. I'm not saying it hasn't been in the past, but from what I've seen growing up, I've seen a massive shift from my generation to my daughter's generation now in how they see people.
Of course.
And it's getting better all the time. So, and I think we don't talk about that often enough in a positive light. And so, yeah, that was, I think, one of the reasons why they didn't like me very much.
But one of the things that, alongside that scenario, is I'm really unhappy at this moment in time with the agendarising of sports and the leveraging of it. And I wrote an article in a newspaper the other day about why can't sport just be
sport.
about sport?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the only people that don't want it to be about sport are the activists that want to highlight their particular cause.
They want to hijack sport because sport is so popular with people, and politics is not popular with people. And the only way politics can get their noses into people's everyday lives is if they hijack sport. And that is, for me, that is not acceptable.
But some people would say it has always been thus. Some people would say that you and I are idealists. 1936, that this is the classic case of when it should never have been leveraged, because if ever there was a situation where you prove the point that politics and sport should never be put in the same place, is the foul messages that Hitler was putting out in the 1936 Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. So that should have been a blueprint for never having used it there again.
Absolutely.
Because I'm constantly confronted with the idea that my sentiments of, which cause is like George Orwell's expression, one animal is more equal than another. Which cause is more worthy? Because at this moment in time, you've got climate crisis, you've got homelessness, you've got homophobia, you've got misogyny, you've got transphobia, you've got Islamophobia, you've got knife crime, you've got cost of living, you've got every cause you can think of. And I make the argument that, we'll have cause, and a side order of sports.
Yeah.
And it can't be right that is what sport is for. Sport, to me, I know it will chime with you because you're in the business of wanting to entertain, is the ultimate in escapism.
Absolutely.
It should be nothing more.
That's exactly what it should be. It should be escapism, and that's why I think it's been targeted by the political people and it's just been so frustrating for me to see the amount of fear mongering that has gone on, and they've infiltrated sport to continue that. And I've found that so hard to deal with, so hard to not say anything about over the last few years, and that's what I think cost me my job.
Does it rankle with you? I mean, because I've just made the observation, and I say you are on the bus about certain things. I don't agree with certain things.
I wouldn't expect you to. I wouldn't expect anybody. You're never ever going to find anyone in your life who agrees with everything that you say.
No, absolutely.
And we've got to be adults about having a conversation about it.
Unless you spend your whole life in an echo chamber, right? And then you'll always agree with what everyone else says because you're in the same space. So I think it's right for people to have different views. I don't like the idea that someone has a different view should be shut down and not had that view debated. I don't believe that people should be able to say irresponsible things, and if they're in positions of influence, just be able to say whatever they want without any consequence, because whilst I believe in freedom of speech, which I know you do, it doesn't come with freedom of consequence.
So who's the arbiter of that? Who becomes the arbiter? And this is the
it's
really
an interesting
bit.
one, but I mean, I think
who judges that?
Well, I think
who judges what's hate speech?
Well, yes.
Who do you put in charge of that?
No, that's a useful
and what
point.
Qualifications have those people got that nobody else on this planet have got to be able to judge what anyone else can speak?
There were self-evident examples.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, but again, when we're talking about certain situations that have manifested themselves over the last 2 or 3 years, there was an unhealthy inability to be able to advance certain points, whether it was the Great Barrington Declaration for COVID or a variety of other things about racism where people ran away and didn't want to say anything because it had too much of a consequence for them. That leads me to you, because you said what you meant and you meant what you said. Yep. And it's got you this sort of moniker of having the conspiracy theory. You get into the territory of being an anti-vaxxer, and people that I think it's preposterous because I'm assuming you've had vaccinations in your life. You just had a challenge with this one, right, which by definition doesn't make you an anti-vaxxer.
Exactly,
it means you've got an issue with one particular part of it.
Yep.
But it's taken you from, I mean, I don't know if you take this sort of stuff seriously, from Le God to in certain people's minds, and possibly the mainstream to certain extents, to a bit of a pariah. I mean, how does that? I don't think you are, but other people have, and you've got a mainstream broadcaster like Sky that possibly taken that position. The consequences were they worth it for you to have your freedom of speech? Do you feel that actually you couldn't have lived with yourself if you said, I'm not doing this, I don't believe it, I'm standing up for this, I don't care?
I don't toe the line when I don't think it's right. I won't. Never have done. And the consequences of that meant that I lost my job, which, that's I miss that a little bit because I miss working with my mates.
Yeah.
We've got really good camaraderie. Fortunately, we still get together from time to time. We're doing a pundits tour that we've been around the country doing, so we still get together. So I did miss, and as I said before, I never once woke up on a Saturday morning and thought, oh God, I've got to go to work today.
No.
It was fun. It was great. So I miss that, but I wouldn't do anything differently. I feel like a much freer person not having to toe the line by working for a company.
Do you think you could have been smarter though? Because I'm like you, right? I've got balls and I don't care what I say, and I've got strong views, and I've said similar things to you along the issues of, say, racism in sport, along the issues of sports response to the COVID policy of this country, in terms of the ridiculousness of the way that we handled lockdowns and the way that we expected sport to behave from isolation programs and so on and so forth. Yet I haven't got myself cancelled, and you have to some extent, and you've had a consequence to it.
That's
so
fine.
is there a balance between speaking your mind and getting your point across, or is there a sort of self-harming perspective where you've said what you meant what you said, and ultimately you reap the whirlwind of it?
No self-harm at all.
But you have been cancelled for things, and it has pissed you off.
I have no regrets. No regrets whatsoever. I've been cancelled from like a couple of after dinner speeches.
Yeah, because I saw you on telly talking about it.
Because some people got a bit upset that I was allowed to speak about football to them. I mean, this is the world that we live in. My after dinner speech that I do, I talk about football and I talk about my media career. I don't touch on anything else, and yet I was being cancelled from these jobs because I'm a conspiracy theorist, which is just beyond the pale, really. And as I said, I have no regrets for anything that's happened. I feel I'm probably
you were a bit strong on the Ukraine,
a lot happier. So the Ukraine thing. So my point with the Ukraine thing is that the whole thing that blew up about the tweet that I retweeted. The point of that tweet is to say, during times of war, both sides will engage in propaganda. And if you don't believe that, then you are some kind of idiot.
Yeah.
So that was my point. I could have made the point differently.
Yeah.
I apologise. I did delete the tweet. I apologised for the tweet. I deleted it and said, this is how I should have done it. And that's what I think we should do in an adult society. If you mess up, hold your hand up and go, I'm sorry about that. This is what I actually meant. And I'm sorry about that.
But that doesn't get the airtime, does it?
Let's move on. No, it doesn't
get the airtime.
Of course it doesn't.
So that must piss you off a little bit, that there is a characterisation of you as a result of it.
But do you know what the really strange thing is, though, Simon, is that the media perception of me is very different to what happens in real life. So in my life, when I'm out and I live,
but it's not.
I live a completely normal life.
Yeah, I'm the same as you, mate. So, it's not the punters giving you the gigs, though, in life, is it? It's not the punters that control your representation. Well, to a degree,
you'll be surprised. I still earn enough money to
from CBD
have the lifestyle that I've had before I was working on Sky. I've managed to still be able to generate enough income so that I didn't have to sell my house.
Right.
So when you talk about cancel culture and these people aren't the ones that are giving you jobs, actually, some of them are the ones that are giving me jobs. There are people giving me jobs on the back of the fact that they're grateful to me for standing up for what they believe in as well.
Do you think? I think that's true as well. I think there's
a whole different economy out there and a whole set of people out there who actually do think the way that
Yeah,
I think.
no, I can see that.
And are grateful to me for using my platform to speak up for them who don't have a platform.
No, I can see that. Do you think that in any shape or form, I know this is a slightly negative question because
That's
you probably
all right.
already answered
I'm
it.
good with negative questions.
But do you think in any shape or form some of the parodying or positioning of you by certain segments of people's view on you now has diminished your standing with your legacy at Southampton and the fact that you are the god in their minds?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens to me after my career. Nobody will ever be able to take away the fact that I represented Southampton Football Club 540 times, scoring 209 goals, and spent my entire career in the top flight, and played a big part in keeping them in that division when the odds were stacked against us quite a lot of the time. So nothing can take that away from my legacy. I believe what I've done and what I've said has been consistent over the last few years. I think a lot of what I've said, not everything, but a lot of what I've said has come to pass. And if you were to go back 2 or 3 years, and I might do it one day,
I think
and
you're
talk about the stuff that I was tweeting about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff has been justified.
That being said, and your fortitude and your resilience, you double down on it, haven't you? You've not been prepared to climb down.
I've been consistent, Simon, and you're the very same. I listen to you on the radio. You're consistent in your views, and you stand by what you believe in, and that's what I've done. And a lot of people, when I'm out in public, respect me for that.
But has it impacted upon relationships and family and friends? Because you came off social media for a bit, didn't you, because of some of the stuff that was going on with trolls?
Yeah,
what's been the legacy and consequences of this?
Me coming off social media wasn't for my benefit. That was for the benefit of the people around me.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
So with that in mind,
so I haven't fallen out with any member of my family or close friend over the last 3 years. I think my family thought I'd gone mad a couple of years ago.
Right.
They thought I was a bit, thought they were a bit worried for my mental health.
Right.
And to be fair, I probably, in the early days, when we didn't have a lot to do and we were locked down and, I was just bored. And
I think the world went mad, let alone individuals, didn't it?
And I just kind of got a bit obsessed with trying to find out what was going on because something didn't feel right to me. And so I spent a lot of time looking into it. And I probably neglected my wife and my daughter a little bit at that point because I was too obsessed with trying to find out what was going on, and I had to find a better balance in my life. I've always said that, don't dispute that. One of my best mates, who has completely the polar opposite opinions than I do, who I play golf with on a regular basis, my golf partner at a golf club, ex-policeman, has a completely different view to the world than I have. We've had some real serious debates, and it's got frustrating at times, and we've raised voices at each other, and at the end of the day, once we've had that discussion, we shake hands and we go, all right, never mind, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we're grown up about it. We can have a heated debate and still at the end of the day shake each other's hand and go, all right, we don't agree on that, but let's have a game of golf tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's how life should be.
Too many people are entrenched in their position and will not move from it.
But that's okay to not move from it.
No, but I mean, are offended by the very nature of the fact that you don't have their view.
Yes,
or they don't have yours.
That's
and
the
I
bit.
think there's something about a civilized society where you can have a different position. And I don't need you. You know what? I don't care if you don't want to hold my view.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
You have your view,
let me
have mine.
Let me have my view. Don't shut me down because you don't agree with what I'm saying. Still, let me have my opinion.
Do your mates take the piss out of you though?
Do my mates? No, not anymore.
No.
In fact,
because you're now having proof of concept.
In fact, a lot of them have come up to me and gone, I thought you were mad a couple of years ago, but actually, looking at what's happened, you were right.
Matt, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for being up front with me today.
Cheers, Simon.
Up Front with me, Simon Jordan, is brought to you by William Hill. Future episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. 18 plus, please gamble responsibly.